Welcome back to Small Caps. I'm delighted to be speaking with Matthew Waterhouse today. He is the founder and CEO of 3D MetalForge. Now, 3D MetalForge are an advanced manufacturing company, and you might ask, what is that? Well, here to explain a little bit more about it is Matthew himself. Welcome to Small Caps, Matthew. Delighted to see you.
Good morning. It's nice to be here. Thanks for your time this morning.
Now, you're based up in Singapore. Let's start off with explain, and let me just explain, you're about to launch onto the ASX with your company. The ASX code will be 3MF. You're an advanced manufacturing company. Explain to our listeners who you are and what you do.
Thank you for that. So company-wise, we are an advanced manufacturer. We're an additive manufacturer. We have developed something we call intelligent additive manufacturing, which is a series of technologies and processes and applications that help us integrate various equipments, printers, software, materials to deliver a range of services to clients that want to get into additive manufacturing. So we help them with design, we help them with part printing. We have an ability to put a facility inside their operation if they want to really get into additive, so we can print parts on demand locally for them. And we also help with training and education of clients.
Now Matthew, you called it additive technology.
Yes.
Now, I remember it as 3D printing, but there's a difference, isn't there? Because you're 3D printing, but more. Would that be correct?
It would. So additive manufacturing is, if you like, the umbrella name for the sector. And for us, we help clients with choosing material, building the parameters for printing in that material, designing the parts or redesigning them to take advantage of additive printing, which is sort of the key part of the whole thing, but not everything. And then after we printed the parts, we often do what we call post-production. So sometimes we use machining to change the surface finish or other applications, so that we end up giving clients a finished part to their specifications. Whereas sort of 3D printing tends to be focusing on the printing aspect of it, rather than the whole delivery of the part.
And what sectors are you in? Are you just in a specific sector, or can this be across the whole board? I mean, I understand that, you know, in Australia we have a lot in the mining and the energy sector. Do you cover those areas?
We're starting to. So we focus on oil and gas, maritime, port services, defense, a little bit in the last 12 months on the medical sector because of constraints in the supply chain. We're looking at expanding into the mining, resources and energy sectors. Pretty much sort of big industrial sectors that the technology can help with cutting their costs or getting parts delivered faster or locally rather than transported around the world.
So so your product, is it more cost effective than traditional manufacturing?
It is. We focus on being able to deliver parts cheaper, faster, often better performing than traditional manufacturing, and importantly, more sustainably manufactured. So if I dig into that for a minute, where for the right kind of part, and this isn't a technology that works for simple nuts and bolts, we're looking at more complex industrial parts. We can produce those parts certainly faster. We're talking days and weeks rather than months. Cheaper when we're getting into particular complex pieces. We're able to.
Sorry to interrupt you, Matthew. Why is it faster?
From going from a CAD file and the design and then uploading it to the printer, we're able to print parts in hours and days. Whereas when you're looking at traditional manufacturing, certainly from the start, you can be many weeks and months before the first parts come off the production line. So I remember a case where we were able to produce an impeller for a ship in about 2 weeks compared to their expectation of 10. So additive can really help when you need parts quickly. And that means that when we're able to print parts on demand, people are able to then stock less, hold less inventory, move parts less around the world because we're able to produce them quicker on demand than traditional manufacturing.
And what about shelf life? Have they got the same sort of, I guess, do they last as long or?
They do. I mean, we're producing, the industry nowadays is producing parts in an ever-growing range of materials, but the real big growth sector has been in metals. So we are now printing parts in the same metals that traditional manufacturing uses. So a lot of our parts are produced in things like Inconels, which are corrosion-resistant metals, getting into very specialist metals that industries use. And our starting point is powders with the same chemical composition and mechanical properties as traditional metals.
It's insane. It's to me, it's like it's so futuristic. It's crazy. Are there many? What's the competition like out there, Matthew? Because you're listing on the ASX. Are there other companies also on the ASX? Because I'm putting my investor hat on now, and I'm thinking you are about to list on the ASX. Are there other companies on the ASX in your space?
So from at a high level, the industry is still. I characterize it as more collaborative than competitive at this point. If you think about the enormity of the global manufacturing sector, and then additive is still a very small part of that with a lot of growth opportunity. So most of the effort that we are all doing is supporting traditional manufacturing clients moving from their manufacturing techniques that they've used for often decades to additive, rather than cutthroat competition for business. And people fall into different sectors. There's a lot of companies that manufacture printers. There's companies that are in the service sector that produce parts. And there's a range of sort of ways that people support clients in this. One of the, you mentioned ASX for this. One of the interesting things for us for ASX was that there's a growing number of additive manufacturers listing on ASX. And that covers companies that are making printers, companies that are doing services. There's a nice and a growing range of additive manufacturers there.
You, as I said before, the ASX code is 3MF. You've raised 10 million pretty quickly. You're about to launch. What are you going to use those funds for? It's a sizable amount. Where's that going to be utilised?
Yeah, so we were really excited to be able to raise the funds on ASX, and thank you to all of the people who supported us. One of a key thing I think for this year will be growth initiatives with the funds we've raised, and two standouts. One, we're going to be upgrading our Houston sales and engineering office to a manufacturing plant. So we'll be opening up there. We've had a lot of interest from clients in Houston and Texas generally for manufacturing there. So we'll be really excited to get that up and running this year. Secondly, we're going to be upgrading our office in Perth to a sales and engineering office. So we'd very much like to start expanding into the mining, the resource and the energy sector with our technology. And Australia is a great place to be doing that. So we look forward to doing that this year.
Has COVID had any sort of impact? Because you talked about being over in Houston. Obviously, the US has had quite a torrid time with COVID. Has that had any sort of impact on opening up and expansion?
At a high level, we were well positioned to support customers and new customers through COVID. So a lot of people were reaching out to us in the last year, asking for parts to be produced quickly. Their supply chain had sort of seized up or was not as flexible as they'd hoped. So we were able to help with that, and that was great. We also had an awful lot of interest from companies who, post-COVID, are starting to think about a couple of things. One is, how do I put flexibility in my supply chain? And that might mean bringing manufacturing back home. So how can additive help that? Can you put a plant near me so that I can get my parts without having to transport them all the way around the world? And I think there's been a real big interest and a growing interest in the sustainability angle of this, that I think will be a big important step post-COVID as well. So additive is able to, we use less material, we're more energy efficient, we cut transportation emissions. So I think those big trends are starting to get a lot of companies very interested in additive. and how it can figure into their post-COVID plans.
So you're much more, so you just said much more sustainable, much less emissions. So I would have thought that that's massive in terms of most manufacturers around the globe. And you've spoken about the US. Is there a market in other countries that you're looking at? Because you've spoken about Australia, you've spoken about the US. It sounds to me like there's enormous growth potential for you guys going forward, that you're only just getting started.
I think so. I mean, if you to think about the size of the global manufacturing sector, I mean, it's untouldly large. Additive is still a real minnow. So there's an awful lot of growth opportunities. And I think the biggest opportunity is just convincing companies that the technology is maturing, that we're able to help them with their real frontline needs. You know, Additive has moved very significantly from printing prototypes, one-offs, to a real manufacturing tool. In terms of geographies, our target is Houston. We're looking to open facilities in Europe. Rotterdam is a city that we're going to be looking at. The Middle East has got a lot of industry for the sectors that we support. And then down here in Singapore and of course in Australia. So yeah, lots of opportunities for us to grow into.
And with the Biden administration coming into office and their focus on green technology and all the rest of it, is there a thought to approach them for them to support what 3D MetalForge are doing and the fact that it is so environmentally friendly as a manufacturing process?
Yeah, I mean, the sustainability aspect of Additive, I think, is interesting for a few areas. It's a lot of our current customers want to become more sustainable and more green. So helping them transition their technology and their manufacturing over will help them. Also, I think the green technology sector itself is growing. So being able to support companies making things in those sectors are great. And I think it's increasingly interesting from a capital market perspective. I think a lot of funds, a lot of investors are now actively targeting green, sustainable technologies. And I think from a market perspective, that will really help. And I think I anticipate there's a fair number of the standards bodies will start to look into this space, developing standards or organizations that can supply data or promote green manufacturing technologies. I think will be a big trend over the next few years.
You've recently brought on board a board director, Samantha Tuff, who comes actually from the mining and the energy space here in Australia. What was the decision around that? Was that because, the mining and the energy space is always looking at becoming they are environmentally conscious. Was that the reason what was the reasoning behind bringing her on board?
So, I mean, first off, we were tremendously pleased that she agreed to join the board. I think she can really help us in quite a few areas beyond the one that you mentioned. I think she brings experience of the research sector. She was she can help us think through how we do research in universities where she's the Pro Vice Chancellor at University of Western Australia. She also brings experience of ASX generally. She's been on multiple boards. She has a lot of experience with ASX. And I think the energy and the mining sector, which is sectors that we want to expand into, I think she's one of the most knowledgeable people that we could have asked to help us. And I think she also has a very good knowledge of the clean energy space. And advising us how to connect these together, I think will be of super value to the company.
Well, Matthew, you're only just getting started. What would you say to investors that are putting 3MF on their watch list today? You haven't yet listed. It is imminent. What would you say, a couple of words to investors that are going to start to look at what 3MF are doing? What's the news flow coming up for you in the future?
Yep. So firstly, thank you very much for considering us. We'd love to have you join our additive journey. I think additive manufacturing as an industry is very much at the beginning of an enormous growth. I think the sustainability angle, the flexible supply chain angle, the improved part performance angle is going to be huge over the next few years. I think we've got a unique take on it. We've been developing our technology and processes to help us help customers across a number of different aspects of additive. I believe we've assembled a great team and a great board. We're tremendously excited to be listing on ASX, and we'd love to have you join us.
A fascinating journey ahead. I look forward to the news flow coming out in 2021. All the best of luck on listing on the ASX in the very near future. Matthew Waterhouse, thanks for joining us on Small Caps today.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.